BATARA Guru, or RUDRA-SHIVA, in search of his non-Vedic origins. Part 2. Holy Deity and Living Being. Hello everyone. Today we delve deeper into the origins, particularly the non-Vedic origins of BATARA Guru, or Bataraka, as I prefer to call him, Noble Lord. As you know, this is a topic about Rudra, or RUDRA-SHIVA, more specifically, both the Indian and Indonesian manifestation of this supreme deity or supreme being. And I deliberately say both deity and being, because he was both a deity and a mythical being, e.a. a historical figure, or a real person. Rudra-SHIVA. Rudra, or RUDRA-SHIVA, or in Indonesia called Bataraka after Batara Guru, is the embodiment of Lord Surya Bhagawan, the sun god in Hinduism, Mahayana Buddhism, and Jainism. Harihara, or Shankara Narayana, also called Shivakeshava and Haryada Murti, and Shiva, or Mahadeva, the great god, in the manifestation of Rudra, both in his Vedic and non-Vedic or Dravidian forms. Historically, in the Rig Veda, between ca. 1700 and 1100 BCE, the word Shiva is used as an adjective, an epithet, for several Rig Vedic deities, including Rudra, originally a mixture of pagan and animistic deities from South India, who transformed into a single Vedic deity and was absorbed into early Hinduism, a process that occurred in both India and Western Indonesia. Rudra's animistic nature is evident in his personification of natural elements. He is the roarer of storms and thunder, the healer of herbs, and ruler of animals. Rudra, the Vedic god of storms, winds, hunting, and medicine, is the early, fearsome form of Shiva. History or myth. When discussing Batara Guru, it is important to decide what is history and what is myth. This is noteworthy, and to clarify a few things for you, the listeners and viewers. I discuss here the origin of the cult of Batara Guru, both of the legendary and historical Batara Guru, the life story of the former, of which is based on a mythical nature. There is no means of verification when it comes to historical facts, dates, no works remain, and everything points to the fact that this is merely, not all, speculation about the political and literary history of a very distant past that spans a cultural historical timeline extending from the Mesolithic via the Chalcolithic and Neolithic to the early Vedic age, ending with the late Vedic period that transitioned into the era of Sangam, which can incidentally also be divided into a legendary Tamil Sangam and a historical variant, more dated to historical facts and less speculative. In contrast to the legendary BATARA guru, rather based on vague facts and remains shrouded in mystery, the historical BATARA guru, on the other hand, was a real person from a distant past who can be dated to a specific time period and linked to specific political or religious events or developments. What is striking, in any case, is that I do not have to go back to the beginning of time, before the cosmic age, so to speak, but to certain years, a century, certain places in the world that are relatively recent compared to the speculations about the mythical figure of BATARA guru in connection with the cults of Rudra or RUDRA-SHIVA, and those of Eacatl Quetzalcoatl or Quetzalcoatl, which also have both a legendary and a historical origin. And finally, worth mentioning is non-Vedic Jainism or Jain Dharma, which is virtually impossible to place mythically and historically by means of a timeline. Among the Jains, time is depicted as an eternal Jain cosmic wheel that makes one complete revolution in 2,000 billion or 2 trillion oceans of years. Historical figure. In this sequel to Part 2, I delve deeper into the origins of Rudra or RUDRA-SHIVA as a fertility god and god of war and hunting, storms, wind and medicine. His shrouded pagan and animist Dravidian origins, dating from the Mesolithic. His later Indo-Aryan Vedic origins. His rise as a teacher, guru, and architect named BATARA guru during the classical period, a time of ascetic reformism in which the traditional religious practices and beliefs of the Brahmanan from both the early Vedic period from 1500 BCE to 1100 BCE and the subsequent late Vedic period until ca. 500 BCE were re-evaluated. A development that paralleled and was highly influenced by the non-Vedic belief systems of late Jainism and early Buddhism, propagated by the Shramana or Shramanic tradition, an ancient ascetic and spiritual movement in India in the 6th century BCE, which rejected Vedic authority and the caste system. It was during the Sangam period, approximately from 600 or 500 BCE to 200 or 300 AD in ancient Tamoriṃ that the cult of BATARA Guru developed and its place within the Hindu-Buddhist pantheon took its permanent form. And it was in a period or age of Sangam, in Tamil called Sankāśaṃ, that he emerged as a teacher, guru and architect in Mesoamerica, in ancient Mexico, after his travel to the Indonesian archipelago. During his life, Teotihuacan was the largest city in the Americas, with a population estimated between 25,000 and 100,000 inhabitants during its height, potentially making it the sixth largest city in the world during its epoch. It is said that it was in this metropolis or world city, the capital of the Teotihuacanos, that BATARA Guru acted as a kind of prophet and, in addition to Hindu-Buddhist religion, brought knowledge of art and science from Tamoriṃ. According to a local legend, BATARA Guru or Bataraka left South India and sailed on a raft of snakes to the east, reached Mexico's west coast after a long stay in the western parts of Indonesia, colonized the entire area from Veracruz to the Maya region in the name of the new cult of Quetzalcoatl or Quetzalcoatl, the doctrine of the feathered serpent, which was in fact the Toltec and Aztec equivalent of Rudra or RUDRA-SHIVA, and bestowed new knowledge upon the inhabitants of Teotihuacan, who were considered the distant ancestors of the later Toltecs. His goal was to establish an eternal reign of peace and harmony in Mesoamerica. Following this, with BATARA Guru's final manifestation in the human form of RUDRA-SHIVA as a Vedic god of storm and wind, worshipped by the Toltecs and Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl or Quetzalcoatl, he became god of medicine under his name Vaidyanatha, or Lord of Remedies, hunting animals and humans, and god of the Vedic tradition of Yajna or Yajna. In the period from approximately 200 BCE to 1100 AD. It was during this time of classical Hinduism, since there was a turning point between the old Vedic religion and renewed or reformed Hindu religions, also called the early medieval period, the high renaissance of Hinduism, that his cult was widespread in both South India, Western Indonesia, and Mesoamerica, and he got the status of Lord of the Universe, or Sovereign of the Universe, or Ishanadasya Bhuvanasya, Sadashiva, the Supreme Being, or Paramam-Shiva, the Supreme God, in the Hindu-Buddhist pantheon, a mixture of both Astika in Hinduism and Nastika or Mahayana Buddhism from the Shamanic movements. Various Shramanic movements already existed before the 6th century BCE, which influenced both the Astika and Nastika traditions of Indian philosophy. The Shramanic movements, both early Buddhist and late Jain, produced a wide range of heterodox beliefs, varying from the acceptance or denial of the concept of the soul, atomism, antinomic, ethics, materialism, atheism, agnosticism, fatalism to free will, idealization of extreme asceticism to that of family life, strict ahimsa, i.e. non-violence, and vegetarianism to the permissibility of violence and the eating of meat. First, the Indo-Aryan kingdom of Magadha in North India, which existed from approximately 1200 BCE to 625 AD, and second, ancient Tamoriṃ in the Dravidian south, which, apart from a few independent aristocratic chieftains or smaller dynastic kings called the Vealers or Velir or Satyaputra, was ruled primarily from approximately 600 BCE to 300 AD by the Tamil dynasties of the three crowned kings, who ruled as a triumvirate or triarchy, also known as the three glorified by heaven, world of the three. These Tamil kings, also called Muvendar, they belonged to the Chola dynasty, including Pallava-Nadu, the Pandyan dynasty, or Pandya-Nadu, present-day Madurai, and Tirunelveli, and the Chera dynasty, corresponding to Chera-Nadu, present-day Kerala, and parts of Tamil Nadu. As members of the royal houses of the Cholas, Pandyas, and Cheras, they ruled Tamoriṃ as a loose confederation with the Pandyas of Madurai ruling as primus inter pares. Both the kingdom of Magadha and the three crowned kingdoms form the nerve centers of this non-Vedic anti-Sanskritization and anti-Brahman revolution. These societies were both based on the non-Vedic tradition of Shramanic and on the pre-Vedic Chan social system, which was once introduced by Jainism, which gave a prominent place to the rulers and warrior caste of the Kshatriyu. In both cultures, the Kshatriyus stood superior to the Brahmanan and rejected Vedic authority and Vedic rituals. Tamoriṃ and Magadha had an enormous cultural, political, and religious impact on the founding of the first Hindu-Buddhist kingdoms in Indonesia, all of which were based on the non-Vedic Shramanic tradition with a specific social system that closely resembled the pre-Vedic society established by early Jainism, which had dominated the Indian subcontinent from the late Mesolithic or Middle Stone Age to the early Vedic period for more than 3,500 years, or 35 centuries. Prior cosmic era origins. According to certain Chan texts, this pre-Vedic social system, led by the Kshatriya caste, originated in the early Mesolithic period, when the first Chan Buddha or Tirthankar, i.e. Supreme Preacher, Lord Rishabhnath or Rishabdev reigned, who is also known in Hinduism as Rishab or Ikshvaku avatar, and bears the nickname Father of Human Civilization, and who acquired weapons for the service of society and assumed the power of a Kshatriya king. Rishabhnath means Lord of the Bull in Sanskrit, and his traditional principal symbol is therefore the bull, which stands for steadfastness, strength, and endurance. He is also known as Adinatu, which means First Lord, because he is the first Chan Buddha or Tirthankar of Jainism. It was this historical figure who, according to certain legends, lived millions of years ago in a previous cosmic era. When was Bhagawan, Rishab or Ikshvaku born? Time is unimaginable. I mean, Jainism is too old to think about time. Although there is no confirmed, precise historical evidence, his birth date, called Janam Kalyanak, is celebrated on a specific traditional date according to the Jan calendar, namely Chandra Krishna Navami, i.e. the 9th day of the dark half of the Hindu month of Chaitra, in the months of March or April. In Hinduism, the Rishi Rishab is one of the 24 avatars of Vishnu in the Bhagavad Puran. According to Hinduism, he is said to have had 100 sons, including Kukshi and Imai. He lived millions of years ago, according to Chan cosmology. Some estimate that he lived approximately 8.4 million Vipurvas, or 84 lakh ago, i.e. 592,704 quadrillion years ago, or 592 quadrillion 704 trillion times 10 to the power of 8 years, and is considered the first Jain Buddha or Tirthankar of the current half cycle, or Avsarpini, who organized human society on the Indian subcontinent and gave the country its future name, Bharat, a name that early Jainism gave to India. He was the supreme preacher who organized human society into free occupation-based primordial groups, namely Kshatriya, or priest kings and warriors, Arya, merchants and traders, and Shuksham, or specialized craftsmen. The Chan social system that was dominant before Vedic casteism was introduced in the Indian subcontinent. The Dravidian societies in both the Indus Valley and Tamoriṃ, and also the Indo-Aryan society in Magadha, which emerged many thousands of years later, were institutionally organized and structured by Jainism, not only socio-economically and politically, but also spiritually and mystically, religiously. It was this precursor to the Vedic, or rather the current Indian caste system, that was founded by Lord Rishabhna and that served as an institutional, political, economic, and religious cultural model for the non-Vedic societies in ancient Tamoriṃ and Magadha many thousands of years later. During the Sangam period, for example, this Chan social system in Tamoriṃ had already existed for well over 5,000 to 5,500 years. However, there are indications that Lord Rishabhna, or Bhagawan Rishabh, lived during the Mesolithic, or perhaps even in the early Chalcolithic. He is also known as Adityayah, i.e. First Lord, as well as Adishwar, or First Jina, Yugadidev, or First Deva of the Yuga, Pratham Rajashwar, meaning God King, and Nabeya, or son of Naphi. He is generally regarded as the founder of the Solar dynasty, or Ikshvaku Vansh, or the Ikshvaku dynasty, a dynasty named after his family deity Surya, and also called Surya Vansh, meaning descendants of the sun in Sanskrit, who later also became the sun god in Vedic Hinduism and early Buddhism. The founder of Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama, is generally regarded as a distant descendant of Rishabhna's Solar dynasty. Bhagawan Rishabh earned his nickname Ikshvaku and became the spiritual successor of Sampati Bhagawan, the last Chan Buddha or Tirthankara of the previous time cycle, the third Hara called Dusam Dushma, according to the Chan cosmic wheel of time. It is said that Bhagawan Rishabh taught the people agriculture, different trades and the arts, in addition to the aforementioned division of society into 3 castes. At the time there were no Brahmanan, which I have said before, the precursor to Vedic casteism. Some historians and scholars believe that at the end of the Ice Age, when the snow began to melt, temperatures on Earth rose rapidly, and it began to rain steadily. He made his entrance onto the political and religious stage. He can be linked to early Jainism, also known as Proto-Jainism, and the first Jain practices introduced by him originated in the Indus Valley civilization. This is evidenced by seals featuring figures in meditative postures resembling Kayotsarga and bull motifs associated with Lord Rishabhna, the first Chan Buddha or Tirthankar. In later centuries, these practices were also adopted in Tamoriṃ and Magadha, but by that time Proto-Chanism had already evolved into the Chan religion we know today. Rishabhnath is also mentioned in the Rig Vedas and the Bhagavad Puran as an Avduvhut king named Rishabh, as I indicated earlier, who renounced his kingdom. This suggests a historical interaction between the late Chinese and early Vedic traditions, and a significant overlap with both Vedic and epic literature. Although Rishabhnath was the founder of Jainism, he is generally considered a mythical figure rather than a historical one, because his historical roots or the dates of his life cannot be specifically verified. I regard him as the founder of the Vratya tradition, which represents the pre-classical roots of Jainism, also known as Proto-Jainism, as a precursor to participation in the indigenous, non-Vedic Shramana or Shramanic lineage, and which forms the cultural bridge between mythical and historical Jainism, a bridge connecting the mythical, pre-classical Proto-Jainism of the early Indus Valley civilization with the later historical Jainist Sangh or classical Jainism as practiced in Tamoriṃ and Magadha. The Vratyas in mythical Proto-Jainism, named after the previously mentioned Vratya tradition, are described as ascetics who stand still for long periods in a posture resembling the Jainist Kayotsarga, i.e., standing meditation, and their leader is referred to as the Ekavratya or Arhant, terms that later became central to Jain theology. Here you see Lord Rishabhnath as the founder of the Vratya tradition, which represents pre-classical Proto-Jainism in this Kayotsarga posture. In other images, he is depicted in a traditional posture of the historical Buddha, with his hair in an ascetic bun, seated with crossed legs, often in a lotus position, iconographically very similar to images in human form found in Sarnath or Sanchi of Siddhartha Gautama during the Buddha's first sermon. And finally, it is worth noting that the early Buddhist iconography in the Sanchi stupa or the stupa of Bharavutta, for example, is strongly influenced by late classical Chan art and architecture, the style of depiction of people and animals, plants and dancing, seductive Apsarayan, the diamond throne, and a Bodhi tree, which is closely connected with the Ashok tree, and also with Chan, Buddhist, and later Hindu Yakshini or Yoginian, the female guardians of temples. Rudra or RUDRA-SHIVA in Jainism. Returning to the origin of Rudra or RUDRA-SHIVA, with which I began the video. It is certainly worth noting that Chan cosmology and mythology mention the 11 Rudras, the manifestations or sons of the Vedic storm god Rudra, whose traditions have since been closely associated with Lord Shiva, Mahadeva, or BATARA Guru in Indonesia. In the Vedas, Rudra is known as a divine archer who shoots arrows of death and disease, and who must be implored not to kill or harm in his rage. As a healer and source of 1,000 remedies, however, he also has a beneficial side. He is also a father of the storm gods, the Rudras, sometimes also called Maruts. They make up 11 of the 33 gods in the Vedic pantheon, including the sun god, Lord Surya Bhagawan. The avatars of Rudra or RUDRA-SHIVA, also known as the Ekadash Rudra, are divine manifestations described in the Shiv Puran. Each form represents a unique cosmic force, from Kapali, which symbolizes fearlessness in death, to Shambhu, which embodies peace and creation. The fact that the Rudras or Maruts are conceived in Chan cosmology and mythology is proof that their origins, their father Rudra, have their roots in animism and paganism, and were also worshipped in Jainism. Hinduism and even early Buddhism did not exist at that time. My conclusion is that Rudra, from the early Vedic period, alongside his role in early Hinduism as the Vedic deity Vaju, also called Vata or Pavana, simultaneously appeared as the god of wind or storms and the god of medicine and wildlife in both Jainism for the ruling and warrior caste and certain indigenous Dravidian folk religions for the lower castes. The ancient Vedic religion had no belief in reincarnation or concepts such as samsara or nirvana. It was a complex animistic religion with polytheistic and pantheistic aspects. This is also the reason why gods such as Rudra or RUDRA-SHIVA and Surya Bhagawan, the later Hindu sun god, who held a prominent place in indigenous Dravidian beliefs, were adopted and incorporated into the ancient Vedic religion of the Indo-Aryans. Ancestor worship was an important, perhaps even the central, component of the ancient Vedic religion. This was also comparable to the much older indigenous Dravidian belief systems. Elements of the ancestor cult still appear in modern Hinduism in the form of Shraddha, which can be traced back to the Vedas, but also to indigenous Dravidian folk religions, which were practiced, for example, in the Neolithic Indus Valley civilization or the early Japā culture, and in the ancient pre-Sangam Tamulakkam, and which flourished and coexisted peacefully with Jainism, the religion that belonged only to the upper caste of the Kshatriyus, from the late Mesolithic or Middle Stone Age to the early Vedic period or Indian Bronze Age. For more than 3,500 years or 35 centuries, this Chan society existed until the Varna system emerged in the late Vedic period, also known as the Indian Iron Age, introduced by the invading Indo-Aryans who spread Brahmanism and Sanskritization, resulting in a downfall of the Chan society as a divine ordinance, a decline in the supremacy of Jainism as a state religion, and a displacement of the position of the warrior and ruler caste of the Kshatriyus by the priests, the Brahmana. Epilogue. In conclusion, let us call upon the 11 forms of Rudra: Kapali or Shiva, Pingala, Bhima, Virupaksha, Vilohita, Shasta, Ayapada, Ayabhutnya, Shambhu, Chant, and Bhava. May the power of Nilkant, Adiyogi, Mahakala, Bholanatha, Pashupati, Natrai, Rudra, Shankara, and Mahadeva destroy negativity, awaken consciousness, ignite devotion, and protect. Thanks for watching and listening. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.